You're standing at the edge of water you cannot cross by foot. Across the strait, land is visible, a smudge of green on the horizon, maybe 15, maybe 20 miles out. You have no rope, no metal, no language in the way you'd recognize it. And yet, something in you is already calculating how to get there. Here's the disruption. This isn't a hypothetical about you. It happened. And it happened roughly 1 million years ago, 800,000 years before Homo sapiens even existed. In 1998, on the Indonesian island of Flores, a team led by Australian archaeologist Mike Morwood uncovered stone tools at a site called Mata Menge. The tools were crude, flaked cores, choppers, the kind of technology associated with Homo erectus, a species with a brain roughly 1,000 cubic centimeters, about 70% the size of yours. The tools were dated to approximately 1 million years old. The problem was Flores itself. Even at the lowest sea levels of the Pleistocene, when glaciers locked up enough water to drop oceans by over 120 meters, Flores was never connected to the Asian mainland. It sat isolated across the Wallace Line, a deep water boundary separating Asian fauna from Australian fauna. To reach it, something had to cross at least 19 miles of open, current-driven ocean strait, repeatedly, in numbers large enough to establish a breeding population. This is going to change how you think about what human actually means, because the drive to cross water deliberately toward land you can't be certain exists may predate our species entirely. Segment 1. The scientists didn't believe it at first. A pre-sapiens hominin, without complex language, without metal tools, without, as far as anyone could prove, the cognitive architecture for planning a multi-day voyage, had apparently built or lashed together something that floated and used it on purpose. The alternative theories were almost more unsettling. Could Homo erectus have been swept out to sea by a tsunami, clinging to floating vegetation, and simply gotten lucky? Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Tsunamis triggered by seismic activity are common there even today. A single, stranded, pregnant female washing ashore could theoretically found a population, but the numbers on Flores didn't support a single lucky accident. Tools kept appearing across multiple, separate time layers, spanning hundreds of thousands of years. One shipwreck doesn't explain a sustained presence, but here's where it gets stranger. Segment 2. In the 1990s, an archaeologist named Robert Bednarik decided to stop debating it and test it. He built rafts using only materials and techniques plausibly available to Homo erectus. Bundled bamboo, no metal fastenings, no woven rope, nothing invented after roughly 1 million years ago. In 1998, his team launched a raft called the Nail Tassi 2 across the Lombok Strait, the same violent, current-choked passage that separates Bali from Lombok along the Wallace Line. The strait has current strong enough to sink modern fiberglass boats. The bamboo raft made the crossing. It took paddling. It took, by Bednarik's own account, a crew willing to fight a current, actively trying to drag them out to open ocean. It was not a lucky drift on calm water. It required intention, sustained physical coordination, and something that looks uncomfortably like planning. Except there was a problem. The raft proved erectus could physically make the crossing. It didn't prove why they would. There was no evidence of language complex enough to plan a voyage, no evidence of foresight in the way you'd define it. The motive stayed a mystery, and it still is over 25 years after Bednarik's crossing. But somewhere between maybe accident and definitely deliberate, the archaeology moved on to hard proof. Sitting in a museum you can walk into today. Segment 3. In 1955, workers draining a bog near the village of Pes in the Netherlands pulled out a hollowed log. It was radiocarbon dated to between 8040 and 7510 BCE, roughly 10,000 years old. Carved from a single trunk of Scots pine just over 3 meters long, the Pes canoe is the oldest known constructed boat on Earth that has physically survived. Unlike the Flores crossings, which archaeologists have to infer from geography and stone tools, the Pes canoe is an object. You can see the adze marks. You can see where a hand, a modern human hand, Homo sapiens, brain fully your size, decided a floating log wasn't enough and carved it into something steerable. It now sits in the Drents Museum in Assen. It is not a replica. That's not the whole story though. Segment 4, nearly 55,000 years before that log was carved, a different population of Homo sapiens had already done something far more extreme. Around 65,000 years ago, a figure confirmed in 2017 by archaeologist Chris Clarkson using new dating techniques at the Majid Bebe rock shelter in Australia's Northern Territory. Modern humans reached Sahul, the combined landmass of Australia and New Guinea. To do it, they didn't just cross one strait. They island hopped through Wallacea, a chain of Indonesian islands facing at least one open water gap of over 30 miles even at the lowest ice age sea levels, with no land visible on the far side for most of the crossing. At Majid Bebe, Clarkson's team found ground-edge stone axes and processed ochre pigment, evidence of symbolic thought, not just survival tools. These people knew what they were doing. They had watercraft capable of carrying enough people, food, and fresh water to found a population on a continent no human had ever seen. But the population that had made a similar crossing a million years earlier hadn't gone anywhere. They were still there. Segment 5. In 2003, a team led by Mike Morwood and Indonesian archaeologist Thomas Sutikna excavated Liang Bua, a limestone cave on Flores. They found a nearly complete skeleton of an adult hominin standing roughly 1.1 meters tall, with a brain of about 380 cubic centimeters, smaller than a chimpanzee's. The species was named Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit by the press within days. This wasn't Homo erectus itself, but very likely its descendant, a population that crossed to Flores roughly 1 million years ago and then shrank over hundreds of thousands of years of island isolation, a well-documented evolutionary pattern called insular dwarfism. Originally, researchers estimated Floresiensis survived until about 12,000 years ago. In 2016, Sutikna and colleagues published a correction in Nature. Revised stratigraphic dating pushed the extinction date back to roughly 50,000 years ago. That number matters. It means Floresiensis was very likely still alive, still on that island, around the same window that Homo sapiens was island hopping through the exact same waters on the way to Sahul. Two human species, separated by nearly 1 million years of divergent evolution. Possibly close enough, geographically, to have crossed paths. You will never know if they saw each other. No artifact confirms it. What the evidence does confirm is this. At least twice, separated by roughly 1 million years on opposite ends of what it means to be human, two different species stood at the edge of water they could not cross on foot and built something anyway. Not because a leader told them to, not because writing recorded a plan. Something in the hominin lineage, long before it had the brain size to write its own name, already treated the horizon as an instruction rather than a boundary. Every time you feel pulled toward a coastline, a bridge, an edge of something unfinished, you're not inventing that impulse. You inherited it from something that wasn't fully you yet.